Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Repeat Ron, and today we're going to be doing another Killing Floor 2 bracket fight. This is going to be all of the weapons versus one another without taking into consideration any sort of perks whatsoever. So it doesn't matter which class this is on, it doesn't matter what perks you have. We're not going to be taking those into account, and we're just going to be ranking these against one another to see which weapon comes out on top. These will be explained very briefly because we have a lot of weapons to get through. So up first we got the M4 versus the Static Strikers. I would immediately give this one to the M4. It gives you a ranged option. It has high damage and it scales well. It also is fairly accurate and you can spam fire it very fast. Static Strikers are not bad because they do have an EMP effect, but other than that, I think the M4 wins here. Nail gun versus the compound bow. I give it to the nail gun here. You get more shots with it. You get more damage per second with it. Compound bow isn't bad because it does have ice arrows and it can potentially have infinite ammo, which is a pretty big plus if you're willing to go pick up the arrows and if you're not interested in using the ice arrows part of it. Boomstick versus the cock and burn. The cock and burn is really bad without perks. It kind of needs floor fire to work. The double barrel is a very strong option and scales well with upgrades, so double barrel. HRG Tesla launcher or the blunderbuss. You get status effects with the HRG Tesla launcher like the EMP and the microwaves that it fires, which is pretty nice. You get high damage with the blunderbuss, but it can potentially blow you up. That is kind of a downside if we're not taking perks into this. It also kind of reloads slow. I think I'd give this one to the HRG Tesla launcher. The Doomstick or the M14. Ooh, the Doomstick has higher damage, higher burst damage, but it weighs quite a bit. And if I only had one weapon, it probably wouldn't be my first choice. The M14 has a good amount of ammo. It does weigh a good amount. It's got good sights. I think I'd give this one to the M14 overall. Hemoclobber or the Killer Watt. The Hemoclobber is lightweight. You can heal with it. You can block and parry with it. You can do pretty high damage, so that's all pretty nice. The Killer Watt is a ranged option, which is a big advantage if I could only take one weapon. I think I'd still go with the Hemoclobber here just because you can also heal yourself and the AoE hit is pretty nice. Minigun or the Fire Axe. I would go with the minigun here. The Fire Axe by itself is kind of sluggish. It does hit reasonably hard, but not the best. Minigun will hit better, even though it is still kind of sluggish itself, but at least it does have range. 2011s or the M32 grenade launcher. I don't think either of these weapons are great without perks because the M32 reloads really slow and there's a high chance of blowing yourself up with it. The 2011s don't do the most amount of damage without any sort of perks. I guess I'd still go with the 2011s here because they're a bit of a safer option. C4 or the Mine Reconstructor. Mine Reconstructor can poison enemies. It can heal you. It's a very awkward weight. C4 works pretty well for blowing stuff up, but you can also blow yourself up with it. I don't think either of these weapons are way great without perks either, but I would pick C4. Rhinos or the Blast Brawlers. The Blast Brawlers do give you a ranged option and you can block and parry with them, which is nice. The Rhinos are pretty accurate. They do decent damage. If I had one of these, I think I'd rather go with the Rhinos even without perks over the Blast Brawlers. Ion Thruster or Medic SMG. Medic SMG is lightweight. Medic SMG does do low damage though, and as a weapon it's definitely not going to beat the Ion Thruster, so Ion Thruster wins here. The Road Redeemer or the Buckshots. I think I would go with the Buckshots here. They do give you a ranged option. They do good damage. Road Redeemer, it can block and parry, which is nice, but it is still kind of sluggish without perks. The FAMAS or the Katana, I think I'd go with the FAMAS here. Even though the FAMAS can be a little bit awkward, I still think it's less awkward than no abilities Katana. The M99 Sniper Rifle or the Incendiary Rifle. If I could only have one weapon, I'm definitely not going to go with the M99 because I'm just not going to have enough bullets for it. It will hit really hard, but unless it's only on boss wave, it's not going to be that useful. The Incendiary Rifle will be useful pretty much against everything, so I'd pick that one. FAL or MAC-10, I'd give this one to the FAL. It's got more damage and it potentially higher DPS, although it is kind of hard to control with the recoil, so still not the greatest. Kroval or the Riot Shield and the Glock 18, I'd give this one to the Riot Shield and the Glock 18. You can block with it, you can shoot enemies with it, so I'd pick that over the Kroval. Kroval's kind of slow without perks. The Grenade Pistol or the MKB-42, I'd go with the MKB-42 here. It's a more well-rounded weapon than the Grenade Pistol. Grenade Pistol can do really high damage, but you don't have the most ammo with it, so I think MKB wins. Beluga Beat or the Pump Shotgun. I think I'd go with the Beluga Beat here. Even without any sort of perks or anything, it's still pretty good at bullying bosses, and I would say it's better than the Pump Shotgun against most enemies. Scar or the Incision. Ooh. The Incision has the EMP effect. You can heal with it. You can punch through enemies with the healing darts. The Scar is really well rounded though, even though it still has a small magazine. You do get a lot of ammo though with the Scar. I think I'd rather have the Scar if I could only have one. but that's kind of a difficult decision because I don't think the Incision would be a bad option either. Spitfires or the Kaboom Stick, I would say Kaboom Stick wins here. Spitfires are not bad even without any sort of perks adding them up, but they do benefit a lot more from perks. The Kaboom Stick's going to be good with or without perks, and it's just a very solid weapon. The Husk Cannon or the P90, this one's a bit weird. You get a lot of shots with the P90. It doesn't weigh that much. It has good sights. It doesn't have very much recoil. The Husk Cannon, you also get a good amount of shots, and it will do more damage. I think if I had to fight everything, I'd rather have the Husk Cannon than the P90. The Freeze Thrower or the Eviscerator. I would say the Eviscerator wins here because it's one of the melee weapons that's least affected by melee skills. So even if you don't have good melee skills, this one's still a pretty good option. Dragon's Breath or the Seeker 6. If I had to fight everything, I think I would rather go with the Seeker 6 because it works well against crowds. It can work pretty well against large enemies. The Dragon's Breath wouldn't be a bad option for this because it does well against most things, but it still struggles with some. So I think I'd give this one to the Seeker 6. Mosin or the Flamethrower, I would definitely want the Mosin over the Flamethrower. Flamethrower works really well against small enemies, but that's about it when you don't have any sort of perks on it. So Mosin will do better against everything. Winchester MP5, Winchester here, it's higher damage, longer range, better upgrades, everything like that. I would much rather have the Winchester. Medic AR or MP7. I would rather have the Medic AR here. I think it's a better weapon, larger magazine, does decent enough damage, has okay recoil control, and you can heal with it. HZ12 or 500 Magnum. I think I would rather have two 500 Magnums than the HZ12, although the HZ12 would be a good option to have too, even without perks, because it still has a large magazine and it still shoots fairly quick. Bullpup or the RPG, you get a lot more ammunition with the Bullpup, and it can work okay against most things. I think I would rather go with that over the limited shots I get with the RPG, because I have to be at a certain distance for the RPG to work. It does hit really hard though. It would be the best against large enemies like Flesh Pounds and even Scrakes, as well as against any of the bosses, but the Bullpup would probably be the most consistent to get the furthest without any sort of perks. If it's a long map, I'm definitely taking RPG. If it's a small map, I would definitely take the Bullpup. I guess I'm going to compromise and say that it's on its best terms, so I'd pick the RPG. Gravity Imploder or the Arc Generator. Ooh, both these weapons are pretty good. They have good AoE damage. They do really well against everything. I think I would go with the Arc Generator though, because it does do more damage towards bosses, and you can use it in any environment, whether it's small or whether it's a short map or a long map. Winter Bites or the Medic Shotgun. I'd rather have the Medic Shotgun in this case, even though the Winter Bites are not bad. The Winter Bites do freeze enemies. They reload okay. They do decent damage. Medic Shotgun is just well-rounded though. It does pretty high damage. Doesn't weigh that much. AR-15 or the Seal Squeal. I think I'd go with the Seal Squeal here, even though there is a high chance of blowing yourself up with it. The Heel Thrower or the Desert Eagles, definitely Desert Eagles. The Heel Thrower is so good because it benefits so well from all of Medic's perks. So not having Medic's perks makes that weapon pretty bad overall. M4 or the Nail Gun, I think I'd rather have the M4 here. Higher damage. Double Barrel or the Tesla Launcher, I think I'd go with the Double Barrel here. Higher damage, lower weight. I kind of like that. M14 or Hemoclobber, I think I'd go with the M14 here. It's got pretty good overall everything, and it works as a good general purpose weapon even without any sort of perks. The Hemoclobber works pretty well too as a defensive weapon, but I think the M14 would be a little bit easier to use. Oh, Minigun or 2011s. Again, I don't think these are great without perks. Either one. I guess I would go with the Minigun because I think you can have higher DPS with it. C4, the Rhinos. Without any perks, I guess I'd go with C4. It works pretty well on every class, so I guess that one. Ion Thruster or Buckshots, definitely the Ion Thruster. It would beat the Buckshots in terms of the overall damage, plus it has really long reach for a melee weapon. FAMAS Master Key or the Incinerary Rifle, I think I would go with the Incinerary Rifle here. Even though it doesn't benefit without perks, it's still an okay enough weapon overall. FAL or the Riot Shield. Riot Shield does give you more defense, and it works well against small enemies, as well as if enemies are raging at you, it does give you more defense, but I think I'd go with the FAL because it works decently well against everything. MKB-42 or the Beluga Beat. I think I'd go with the Beluga Beat here. It works, again, pretty well against everything. Scar or Kaboom Stick. Kaboom Stick wins here. Higher damage. They're both the same weight. And if I only had one, I'd rather have the Kaboom Stick because it works well against everything, and you can't injure yourself with it. Husk Cannon or Eviscerator. I think I'd go with Eviscerator here. You do get all the advantages of a melee weapon, but without having to have any of the perks to a melee weapon. The Husk Cannon definitely benefits more if you're running the demo or the Firebug perks with it, so Eviscerator. Seeker 6 or Mosin? I would rather have the Mosin. Longer effective, well, not necessarily longer effective range. The Seeker 6 could potentially have even longer range than the Mosin. But good effective range, and you get a melee weapon. You can also block and parry with the Mosin. I would take that over the Seeker 6. The Winchester or the Medic Assault Rifle, I would take the Winchester. Scales higher, does higher damage. 500 Magnums or the RPG, I would say 500 Magnums because they work better against everything. Whereas the RPG can work really well against crowds if they're at a distance, and it can work well against large enemies. The 500 Magnums can work at any distance against pretty much everything, so I think they just beat it out in terms of versatility. Arc Generator or Medic Shotgun? I would rather go with the Arc Generator here. It works really well against everything and does a lot of damage to bosses. Seal Squill or Desert Eagles? I would say Desert Eagles. You don't run the risk of injuring yourself with the Desert Eagles, and they are quite solid even without any sort of perks. M4 or Double Barrel as a weapon? I think the M4 wins here. Longer range, decent spread. The Double Barrel has quite a wide spread, but it does do high damage at close range. I would say the M4 though. M14 or Minigun? I would say the M14 wins here. It does well against everything. Minigun does okay against everything, but not the best. C4, the Ion Thruster. I think I'd go with the Ion Thruster here. High damage, long reach, can block and parry, can add the fire status effect to it. Incendiary Rifle or FAL. I think I'd go with FAL here. It works better against more things than the Incendiary Rifle, although the Incendiary Rifle would be better for crowds. Beluga Beat or Kaboom Stick. I would say Kaboom Stick here. Higher damage, you can't injure yourself. Just an all-around solid weapon. Eviscerator or Mosin. Both these are melee weapons. Both of them function as melee weapons. Both of them can block and parry. Both of them have melee attacks, assuming you run out of ammo. You have longer effective range with the Mosin, and the Mosin will do more damage per shot. I think I'd go with the Mosin here. Winchester or 500 Magnums. You do actually get more damage with the Winchester, even though it does have a slower reload speed. If you want faster reloads but still high damage, go with the 500 Magnums. I think I would pick the 500 Magnums over the Winchester though. Arc Generator or Desert Eagle. I would go with Arc Generator. It still works really well against everything. The Desert Eagles also work really well against everything, but I think the Arc Generator does it a little bit better. M4 or M14, I think I would go with the M4 here. It has higher damage and works really well against everything. The M14 can work pretty well against everything, but I don't think it does as well against large enemies as the M4 would. Ion Thruster or FAL, I think I'd go with the Ion Thruster here again. Kaboom Stick or Mosin, I think I'd rather go with the Kaboom Stick here. Again, high damage really helps it out and not being able to hurt yourself. 500 Magnums or Arc Generator? I think I'd go with the Arc Generator. I think the Arc Generator works better against more things, and you get a good amount of ammunition for it, so Arc Generator here. M4 or Ion Thruster? Ooh, this one's a difficult one. M4 has good range and does well against everything. Ion Thruster doesn't have the range, but it does do well against everything. So you do get some advantage there, and it's one of the least sluggish melee weapons. I think I'd still give this to the M4 though. Kaboom Stick or Arc Generator? Ooh, that one's really difficult. Both of these do really well against pretty much everything. The Arc Generator can potentially have longer range, but most of the fights with these weapons are going to be at close to medium range. You get more mobility with the Kaboom Stick because you can use its alt fire to bounce yourself away, but with the alt fire of the Arc Generator, you get the EMP status effect and you do more damage to enemies. I think I would give this one to the Arc Generator, but just by a little bit. It's very close. M4 or the Arc Generator. I think I'm going to give this one to the Arc Generator as well. M4 is really good overall. It works well against everything, but I think the Arc Generator works a little bit better, so I'll give it to that. Moving over to the other side, we got the Glock 18 or the Medic Pistol. Medic Pistol's lightweight, scales well with upgrades, but I'd give this one to the Glock 18. Higher rate of fire, higher damage. 1911 or the Medic 501 rifle. I think I'd give this one to the 501. It works a little bit better, and you do get the healing grenades that can help out a lot. Crossbow or Tommy gun. Crossbow, you do have potentially infinite ammo and it does high damage, but I think I'd rather have the Tommy gun for fighting just about everything that's small, where the crossbow isn't that great at that. 1858s or the Vampire. I think I would give this one to the Vampire. I think the Vampire's better overall because it can do more damage and it can weaken enemies. Pulverizer or the Hemogoblin. Pulverizer does hit really hard, but it is extremely slow and sluggish, and its main attack does not do very well against most enemies because it will likely knock them down and not kill them. Hemogoblin's not way great outside of Medic, but it's probably a little bit better, so I think I'd give it to the Hemogoblin. Scorcher or the AA-12, I would give this one to the AA-12. High damage, high magazine size, pretty accurate too, even without perks. Nail Gun or the Centerfire, I would give this one to the Centerfire. Longer range, higher damage, at least higher damage per shot. The Nail Gun could out damage per second it, and the Nail Gun would not be a bad option to take without any sort of perks either. The AK-12 or the Helios Rifle, I would say Helios Rifle, it's more damage than the AK, and it fires out microwaves, which are really good. Thermite Bore or Stoner, I'd give this one to the Thermite Bore. More damage, explosion and fire damage, and damage over time compared to the Stoners, just constant damage. The Chris Vector or the Railgun. The Chris Vector or the Railgun. Railgun hits really hard, but if I could only have one of these weapons, I don't think I'd want the Railgun because you get such limited ammo and it doesn't work the best against small enemies. I think the Vector would win here then for that. Zweihander or M79 Grenade Launcher. Zweihander's pretty slow and kind of sluggish without perks. The M79 can blow yourself up though, and it does have a big explosion radius, so you'll likely be taking chip damage from it, so I guess I'd pick the Zweihander over it, but not by much. Frostfang or UMP, I would pick the Frostfang. Melee weapon, can freeze, can also do bonus damage to frozen enemies. Bastion or the Microwave Gun, I think I'd go with the Bastion here. You can block with it, which is really nice. Battle Axe or the M16. Battle Axe will hit harder, but the Battle Axe is really, really slow off perk without having any perks that increase its speed or anything like that. So I would probably go with the M16. It has good versatility. It does well against pretty much everything with the assault rifle and the grenade launcher part. Glock 18s versus the 501. I think I'd rather have Glock 18s. They can do more damage per second than the 501. Tommy Gun or the Vampire. I think the Vampire can outdamage the Tommy Gun, and you're generally safer using it because you can slow down enemies from the bleed effect. The Crystal Spikes are also really good for taking care of most enemies. Hemogoblin or AA-12. AA-12 wins here. Big magazine, high damage, full auto, long range. Just really good. Centerfire or the Helios Rifle. Centerfire will hit harder and have longer range. Helios Rifle has a better attack type though, being a microwave attack. This one without any perks, I think I would still rather have the Centerfire over the Helios Rifle, but just by a little bit. Thermite Bore or the Vector. I think Thermite Bore wins here too. High damage plus the explosion and the fire can really help, and it works really well against everything. The Vector isn't bad against everything, but I don't think it's as strong as the Thermite Bore. Zweihander or Frostfang. Frostfang wins here. Both these are melee weapons, but the Frostfang is far more wieldy, and it acts as a gun, so it wins. Bastion or the M16. You could take the Bastion for the shield and get more defense, or you could take the M16 with the grenade launcher and get more damage. I think the M16 wins here by a little bit, because I think the Bastion gets the most benefit from like SWAT's armor perks, whereas the M16 works pretty well against everything. Bone Crusher versus Bone Crusher. Bone Crusher wins, I guess. Glock 18s or Vampire. I think I'd go with the Vampire. I think it has more consistent damage, where the Glock 18s really benefit from Gunslinger's perks. The Vampire's pretty strong without perks. AA-12 or Centerfire. I would go with the AA-12 here. Higher potential damage, higher damage per second, and it works well at long range. Both these weapons are really good without perks, but you also get the faster reload speed with the AA-12, so I'd pick that one. Thermite Bore or Frostfang. I would go with the Frostfang here. Melee weapon, plus you get to freeze enemies, is pretty strong. M16 or Bone Crusher. I'd go with the M16 here. It's more well suited for most tasks than the Bone Crusher is. Vampire or the AA-12. I would go with the AA-12 here again. Higher magazine size. Good range. The Vampire works pretty well though too without perks. Frostfang or the M16, I think I'd go with the Frostfang here. You get the melee weapon, you get freezing, you get blocking, you get a whole bunch of stuff with it. The M16 you still get a lot. You get the assault rifle that works well against crowds and medium enemies, and the grenade launcher also works well against crowds and larger enemies. But I think the Frostfang does things a little bit better. And then our final match on this side, the AA-12 versus the Frostfang. Both these weapons work really well without any sort of perks. The AA-12 has a large magazine, it has good range, it has a good spread. Frostfang doesn't have as long a range and not as good at spread, but you can block and parry with it. You can also use it as a melee weapon, and you can freeze enemies with it. With all that, I think I would give this to the Frostfang over the AA-12 by just a little bit. And then for our last matchup, we have the Arc Generator or the Frostfang. The arc generator is going to do better against most enemies. It's going to do better against crowds. It's going to do better against large enemies, and it's definitely going to do better against bosses. The Frostfang has the advantage of being able to freeze enemies as well as do decent damage at close to medium range, and the axe on it can help if the enemy is frozen, which is really useful. I think for this one though, I would give it to the arc generator being the best weapon without any sort of perks. It does very high damage, it does well against everything, you get a lot of ammo with it, so I think the arc generator is our winner here. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did and you're not subscribed, be sure that you get subscribed. That way you get notifications whenever I post any of these videos. Special thanks to all the supporters of this channel. This will be updated at the end of the month. This is for anybody that's part of the YouTube membership program or part of the Patreon. If you sign up for either of those, you do get bonuses like getting early access to certain videos, as well as some extra features on YouTube. If you guys would like to see more Killing Floor 2 bracket fights or more guides and stuff, check out these videos right over here. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye!